love bottom feeders. There are not that many people who do love bottom feeders, however. And it's a question that we have to ask ourselves, why? They're ugly. They live in dark places and usually stinky places. And they eat things that nothing else will eat. So there is no wonder that we have an aversion to bottom feeders. But I love bottom feeders. This is sturgeon. And sturgeon has existed on this planet for 200 million years. When it comes to one species being inspired by another, that's something I think humans can be inspired by. 200 million years of survival and thriving. But I like bottom feeders for other reasons. If they didn't exist, everything we love, everything beautiful on this planet wouldn't exist. Because bottom feeders, all of those organisms and animals that break down dead matter and they turn it back into nutrients so everything else can live, without that part of the circle of life, life would not exist. So I love bottom feeders, and I'll say that many times today. We're a pretty amazing species. Humans are creative. We can do amazing things, and we continue to amaze ourselves. However, when you think about the most creative, or really truly the only creative act that humans have ever engaged in, it's making waste. There's no other species on this planet that makes waste. Anything that comes from the result of living of one species becomes food for another. Yet humans, because we're so enamored with our technologies, we've forgotten that. And we've forgotten the need to close the loops. So one question I'd like to ask today is, where are our technological bottom feeders? Where's the creativity in mankind to take care of all of that stuff that once we use, we no longer look at, we throw away? Well, there's no such thing as a way. I'm talking on basically from two different podiums, if you will. I run a program called Design for Sustainability at Savannah College of Art and Design. That's my day job. And then where some people love to play Candy Crush all day, my hobby, if you will, is running a nonprofit organization that closes the loop on a substantial waste stream. And we do this with creativity. And so I'd like to show you a few examples of what we do. The organization is called Emergent, and it is a nonprofit. And this is what we deal with. This is our food. 84 million tons of construction and demolition debris are generated in this country every year. 84 million tons. That's a lot of waste. What we look at is the opportunity to turn some of that into different forms of wealth, into nutrients for social systems, for construction systems, and for everybody as a whole. So if I only had a minute to tell you what we do, this is what I would say. We take things like this, and we turn them into things like this. We take things like this, and we turn them in, I got a little ahead of myself, turn them into things like this. We take things like this, we turn them into things like this, and we take things like this, and we turn them into things like this. And this is how we do it. We bring the community together. A lot of this demolition waste comes from redevelopment of public housing. This is usually a very traumatic experience for people living in this housing, because as bad as the conditions might be, they're losing the only home that they know. And they lose it through violence. They lose it through a bulldozer. It's knocked down, it's demoralizing. And not only that, there's no wealth that's generated from that process. So we bring community together. We can bring engineers together with local communities. We bring poor communities together with rich communities. And we engage in a process of deconstruction and reconstruction, rebuilding in that community. So if you want to look at the technical, or let's say the mapping, the strategy, it looks a little like this. And I don't think we have time to go through all of this. So just to point to the circle on the left-hand side, On the bottom where it says market transformation, and then above where it says cultural paradigm shift. Because what we're looking for is a way to enable the construction industry to do this through large redevelopment projects, and we believe that a cultural paradigm shift is necessary to enable that kind of behavior change. So very quickly, looking at some of the things that we do, we create pull meaning there's an interest, there's a demand, driving demand for these kinds of processes and these kinds of materials within the industry. And what does that look like? Well, very quickly, my hometown is Savannah, and there's a redevelopment project in Savannah that started about 6 years ago. And we started working with city agencies and lead engineers and with this redevelopment project, and we engaged in a process of celebratory deconstruction. We brought together individuals who were getting trained in deconstruction. We were able to pay them. We brought them together with volunteers. And even in small examples, over on the far right, only 500 bricks. It doesn't seem like that much. We're strategically symbolic. In other words, those 500 bricks, we didn't need anymore. We knew that that was going into the foyer for the public housing that was being redeveloped. We knew exactly how many bricks we needed. We did it symbolically, and then every time somebody comes into the community center, that's the floor that they see. The floors that you see around here used to be the roofs of these communities. They are now the floors. So what was once a shelter is now a foundation. Other things that we've done, Slate Williams on the far right, electrical contractor, very cynical, and rightly so, when we talked about putting materials back into the new buildings. He said, well, you can't take a stud and put it back in as a stud. And we said, we know that. We can't take it out as a stud and put it in as a stud. But we can work with the truss manufacturer to cut down the wood to a size that it would be manageable. And so what we saw earlier, 900 studs in one day were de-nailed. They were put back into the redevelopment as smaller pieces. And Slate was cynical until he saw it. And that's the power of design. Demonstrate. Don't just talk about it, but demonstrate. Once it was demonstrated, Slate became one of our biggest supporters. Other things that we've done, we work directly with the community. As one example, we train people on how to make their own rain barrels. So this is some of more of the studs. We built a kit. We had a big day for that particular community. They built them, they painted them, and then they had a rain barrel stand for their own houses. So those are a few examples of pulling for the industry. But how do you get citizens more deeply involved with this idea? Once again, we do a lot of other things, but I want to tell you about one thing. We're talking about materials here. We've done a lot of work in public housing units. This example is work that we do in individual homes. We believe that this also can be a wealth stream for the community, and we like to call it material-anthropy. It's not philanthropy. It's not people giving money. It's people giving materials, but it's not like Restore. It's not just giving materials for the sake of a receipt. It's giving materials to the community and then realizing what kind of impact that giving provides to the community. So material-anthropy. How does this work? This was built with a combination of materials from one of our material-anthropists. What you saw Deborah and Chuck Caldwell have a house in Savannah. And through a detailed process, we engaged them in the deconstruction of their interior, and then bring them and invite them out to ribbon cuttings where their materials are used. So you saw this earlier. This was a result of a few material-anthropists. We also bring the community into their homes. So we have volunteer events with Boy Scouts, with all kinds of individuals. They come into the house, they deconstruct. It becomes a very social thing. And the material-anthropists start to understand the value of this kind of giving. And then we also create plaques. And these plaques tell the story of the materials. Because when you look at these buildings, you may not even know that they're reclaimed materials. So how do we create a memory of these materials? Well, we tell the stories of each material, where they came from originally, when they came out of the building, and then we also give credit to the material-anthropists. So we have these plaques on each of the structures. This one group of material-anthropists, or two individuals, husband and wife, this is what resulted. What you see here, the larger the red dot, the more material we use. where their picture is their house, and the lines represent the distance and the geographic direction of the other structures that resulted from that one house. So there can be a lot of impact through one act of giving. We showed this earlier. Two material anthropists. That's John Svensson above, the Caldwells in the middle. Some denailing with the public housing, and corporate sponsorship result in these kinds of projects. So we collaborate, we facilitate a creative discovery and exploration. Why are we doing this? Because every city in America needs this process. We have to stop with the damaging demolition, and start more creatively thinking about how the waste materials can become a form of wealth. And so 230,000 public housing units are coming down in this country alone in the next 20 years. It doesn't have to be a devastating experience. It can be a wealth-generating experience. Our projects focus on solving for pattern. That means one solution leads to a rippling impact of positive solutions. So all of the structures that you've seen, they're serving communities in myriad ways. They're serving food deserts. They're providing food to elderly people. They're creating intergenerational connections between young kids learning how to farm in an urban setting and older people, older neighbors who are in desperate need of fresh produce. So we're looking at structures that can provide that kind of positive impact. But we also play around. This is a bow tie. It used to be a stud. It's a wooden bow tie. It blows people's minds. It shatters their perception of what can be. And that's what we're trying to do. So we take these individuals, we try to change the way they see each other, the way they see their giving or their contribution to society. And by doing so, we believe that these materials, they aren't that physical manifestation that we see, but instead, they're springboards for sustainable change. And so today, I just ask you to think more like a bottom feeder, to celebrate bottom feeders, perhaps act like a bottom feeder, but certainly support our bottom feeders. Thank you.